Environmental Council of Lansing, which is a coalition of more than 60 organizations created to lead Michigan's environmental movement through public policy solutions. Sean helps build and maintain relationships with lawmakers, stay abreast of new bills and legislative committee activities, and keep the organization's member groups informed about developments at the state capitol. He has worked with Michigan State Majority Policy Office, interned with the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, and is a member of the State Bar of Michigan. So please help me in welcoming Sean.
Thank you. There we go. All right, is that better? Okay. So thank you very much. Sean Hammond, Deputy Policy Director at Michigan Environmental Council. So a little bit about MEC. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, which means that we do not get involved in electoral work at all. So we are very policy oriented, and we are actually a coalition of groups. So in 1980, a small number of prominent environmental groups in Michigan decided they needed a group in Lansing to be the eyes and ears of the movement and really kind of focus on Lansing-based issues. So over time we've grown. We now have 65 member groups, ranging from leading conservation voters, Clean Water Action, Trout Unlimited, to watershed councils like to the Mid Watershed, Huron River Watershed Council, two other smaller groups. I think Kalamazoo Environmental Council is a member, West Michigan Environmental Action Council. So the whole gamut of local and statewide groups are under our umbrella. And what we really pride ourselves on is solution-oriented policy. So trying to find ways to work in Lansing to move things forward for the environment. We really pride ourselves on depth of knowledge in policy, not really just looking at it at a surface level. So this, on November 9th, I'll say this was us. This was the bills that were coming at us. I'm talking about green advocacy. I think the best way to do this is talk through a couple different case studies so you can kind of see how different things work. So of course, kind of setting the stage in lame duck, we had Governor Cedar who was leaving office. The new governor, we knew at that point, would be Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who is Democratic Party, so party flip at the top. And that's also for the Attorney General and the Secretary of State, of course. The legislature knew that they weren't going to flip, however, their margins were significantly decreased from 9 members, a 9-member majority in the House to a 3-member majority, and from a super majority in the Senate to only a 3-member majority. So broad swings, which set up on December 1, after a few weeks of hunting break and Thanksgiving. This was kind of what was there. So you can see a number of bills, and these are just the highlights. There was more kind of that popped up and down as things went on. I'm going to focus on 3 of them, but I just want to give you kind of the overview here. So we've got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bills here. So if you look at this, of those, 2 made it through with no significant changes. One of those is now being reviewed by the Attorney General to see if it's even constitutional. The rest of them were either completely stalled out, vetoed, or changed in a very significant way to the point where we were neutral, or I think we're just neutral all of them. So we didn't see that they were going to be negatively impacting things. So, kind of talk through a couple different approaches that we took here. So this was Senate Bill 1211. So this was a bill introduced by former Senator Casperson from the UP. So this had been something that we had long expected. This is not, we were not surprised to see the good senator drop a bill to roll back wetland protections. We had heard about this as potential for a while, and so now we finally got the bill in mid-November. So as introduced, as you can see, 550,000 acres of wetlands, and the Waters United States rule would apply. So basically what this meant was if it was a water in the United States, the DEQ would have to go to the Army Corps of Engineers to confirm whether or not it was a water in the United States, at which point the DEQ would hear back and they'd have to make permit decisions again. This is important because Michigan is one of only 2 states in the country that has delegated authority over a wetland program. So the federal government, of course, passed the Clean Water Act 40-some years ago. There was a provision in there that allowed states to ask for primacy on that so that they could run the program themselves. 48 states have chosen to let the federal government do it. Michigan and New Jersey both have primacy on this, so instead of having to go to the Army Corps and the EPA for a permit, anyone in Michigan goes to our environmental agency, the newly renamed Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy Department, or EGLE. I don't like it any more than you guys do, but it's EGLE. So there was that, and then the biggest thing is it had a provision where anything less than 10 acres was completely unregulated. That includes lakes, so that includes impoundment lakes. So anything that wasn't, so think of a lake that has, some kind of dam or something that caused the lake levels to rise. Wherever that unnatural water is, that would be dry land if you remove the impoundment, would be completely deregulated. You could go build a boathouse out there and not have to get a single permit or do anything. These are lakes like Gull Lake is an impoundment lake. Up north, there's a few like Balloon Lake. These are all lakes, so it was a broad, sweeping bill. Started to get some traction, got out of the Senate pretty easily. But what we did on this one was, this was a coalition building. So this is one of the ways that you really work in the environmental field, especially with, groups that are traditionally more friendly towards business interests and Farm Bureau and the like, who had the majority coming into lame duck. From the environmental side, we know that we have to build a coalition a lot of times to get things done and to get the ball moved in the right direction. So what we did on this one was we reached out to our environmental allies, but also knowing that this in fact impacted wetlands and some of these lakes, we reached out to a lot of our friends in the conservation world. So Michigan United Conservation Clubs, Ducks Unlimited, Trout Unlimited, Anglers of the Ausable, Michigan Steelheaders. So groups that are, they have kind of a specific niche where, they're not super concerned about public health or the environment or like the environment writ large, but they really care about making sure that there are good, healthy fishing populations in the state. So we worked with a lot of them to start to move the needle, and ever so slowly, we got to a point where when this came over to the House from the Senate, it had nowhere near what it needed to move forward. We had managed to convince a lot of folks who happen to have homes on these impoundment lakes that this would be very bad for them, or their constituents who also lived on those lakes. We had, since the sportsmen were weighing in, we had a lot of questions being raised by folks about, okay, so why are we pushing this? This doesn't seem like a great idea. So slowly but surely, we had built a decent-sized coalition of both outside and inside the legislature who were raising a lot of questions on this. So, started to have a back and forth at this point. And really, we worked with our groups and also the Nature Conservancy, who kind of came in at this point, and started to be a broker between the different parties. And we took this coalition, managed to change the bill so that all those exemptions are gone. They all got taken out. all the unregulation of lakes and things over 5 acres, those were all taken out. So really all that was left was some procedural changes along enforcement and notification and things like that, which we personally didn't like, but the DEQ had already signed off on, so we really we didn't feel that it was our place to continue to fight that battle when it was really just procedural issues on their end. And then we did lose a little bit on some rare and imperiled wetland designations. The list changed a little bit. We think that there's a process in there to review them. We imagine that this will be fixed in short order. But none of our majorly endangered wetland areas are actually at risk here from our analysis of the bill. So I believe we ended up saying, I think, either opposed or kind of silently opposed but neutral on this bill in the end, because it's still not great policy, but at this point it's kind of a do no harm. So that's one of the biggest ways that we have seen success, especially in, again, an unfriendly legislature and administration, is building these coalitions, working with kind of unlikely allies to get things across the finish line. Interestingly enough, some of the other folks involved in this one were like local governments and people who need to go get permits and don't want to wait 6 months for the EPA to review their permit. They prefer the 1 month timeline that currently exists in the DEQ. Yeah, so now this one is another story. This one we lost. This is one of those ones that was signed. So this is called, as you can see, no stricter than federal. In 2011, Governor Cedar vetoed this legislation, saying we can't tie Michigan's hands to the federal government. We have to be able to regulate ourselves, and who better to do that than the people of Michigan. However, in his veto letter, kind of left some wiggle room on, like, try this again with some changes. So between 2011 and 2018, this came up every single session, and every single session we seemed to manage to beat it back. Never got quite to the end. This one got through one chamber early in the session in 2017. Proceeded to go to the Senate, have a hearing, at which point the way it was written at that point, it was so broad that actually it brought in a lot of regulations, not just environmental ones, including special education. And we actually had a lot of education allies manage to come in and help stall this bill until the amendment got put on that exempted special education regulations, at which point, of course, fairly enough, they walked away, they got their exemption. So this continued. However, at that same time, the PFAS crisis broke out. The chair of oversight committee at the time was Senator McGregor, whose district includes Rockford. The bill stalled. Again, we thought, Snyder had kind of weighed in with the PFAS crisis. We knew there was a lot of questions with the ongoing lead and copper rule, where Governor Snyder took Michigan to be much more stringent than the federal government in a lot of ways. We figured this one might have kind of died. It then popped up very suddenly in lame duck, as bills are wont to do, and moved through the Senate. At this point, we started weighing in. The House had to vote on this, I think, 5 times in lame duck because of procedural issues. They had to keep sending it back and forth between the chambers. I think there were 5 total votes in lame duck when it already passed through one chamber and was just sitting in the other for concurrence, basically. I don't remember exactly how many votes, but it was kind of ridiculous how many votes that this thing went through. On this one, we built that coalition again, but it wasn't quite as strong because it was a little bit disjointed because of those exemptions and some of the carve-outs and really some of the confusing language. So you can see, one, there has to be an applicable, when there is an applicable federal standard, you need to show a clear and convincing evidence to exceed the federal standard. There's some open questions about what if there isn't a federal standard. Well, what if the federal standard is this type of standard and it's not really this type of standard, but you can see it as applicable to the same type of issue, like PFAS is a groundwater advisory standard. not a drinking water standard, but we're kind of using it as a drinking water standard right now. So litigation is going to come from this at some point. So at this point, we started to re-engage with the governor, realizing that, he vetoed this once. We didn't see any significant difference with PFAS and lead copper. Figured it would be there. We started to fight the media war, and that's where, the other tool of green advocacy is reaching out to the media, trying to put out press releases, try to get earned media, and getting this kind of out in the news. I did a few interviews on it, James did a few interviews on it, really tied into the PFAS and the lead and copper rule, and then, the legal proceedings that are sure to come from this that are going to cost state general fund dollars to fight these, to protect their rules. Ultimately, however, Governor Snyder chose to sign this bill. There was, again, when you have that many bills plus on the table at one time, things start to get traded around that we're not always privy to and we're not always able to influence as highly as some other groups, and ultimately it ended up getting signed into law. At this point, with the new administration, they're just going to have to start to go through this flow chart. We think there's enough wiggle room here that it should be workable. It's going to have court challenges, of course, but I think ultimately this isn't as bad as it could have been if it had been signed into law in 2011, or 2012, or 2013, or any of the previous versions of this bill. This one was one of those bills that, as it kept coming up, it kept getting less bad. It never got, I won't ever say it got better, but it was, it's in a much better situation than it could have been. Okay, and now this one, septic system inspections. So this one is probably the most complicated. It includes coalitions, it includes the long distance, but it also includes kind of working one-on-one with a work group. And that's kind of the third way that legislation gets done. Is instead of working, you're not like, don't think of it as like advocacy in that you're going to your legislator, or the media and trying to get things done. This one was done largely behind the scenes, lots of individual meetings, lots of big 30-person groups sitting around the table talking through the issue. And that's where, we tend to think that's kind of the most positive way that things can happen. Because you can get all the issues out, you can actually deliberatively produce a piece of legislation that all the stakeholders can say, hey, it's not perfect, but we're not going to oppose it. So ultimately, we thought we had some good momentum going into this. We had a lot of stakeholder groups. We had been meeting with a lot of folks. And I should note, we are the only state in the country that doesn't have a statewide septic code. We have 50% of our residents getting their drinking water from groundwater. That is also extraordinarily high in terms of, nationwide. This is something we've been working on at Michigan Environmental Council for at least a decade. We keep seeing this as a bigger problem. Dr. Joan Rose at MSU, human E. coli, every river, she tested 64 rivers, 64 of them tested positive for human E. coli. The amount of E. coli in a watershed has a direct correlation to how many septics are in that watershed. We haven't quite gotten to that, what percentage of that is human. That is what Dr. Rose is actually working on as her next step of this study. So I hope in the next few years we'll be able to take a sample and say this is 20% cow, 20% human, 0.5% goose, whatever the breakdown actually is. And I think that will help us really get to some solutions. So, a couple more facts up there. And ultimately, this was one where kind of time ran out. We were hitting mid-December, and what the sponsor of the legislation was antsy to get this bill done. He thought he had a good product. He thought we could get there. However, ultimately, we ended up opposing this bill because to get it through committee and get it onto the floor, they had to gut it a little bit. And by gutted a little bit, I mean they took out pretty much every meaningful provision to us, left in a preemption of local ordinances to govern septics, and did nothing else. We offered that implementing a statewide code with nothing else would be okay. They would not go for that. Because we have 9 counties now that have time of sale ordinances. So when you sell your home, you have to get your septic inspected. We did have 11. Barry Eaton repealed theirs, sadly. So after finding that it was actually pretty effective in finding failing septics. There's interest groups of the state who do not like time of sale septic codes. And ultimately, I think they ended up getting a bill that they would support. However, you lost a lot of your other players in getting to that point. And this is one where you have to build a coalition in the work group sense, where it's not you're building a coalition to work together, you're building a coalition that all of you sign off. So involved at this table, Michigan Realtors, Michigan Farm Bureau, Michigan Septic Haulers, environmental groups, watershed councils, Michigan Alliance of Local Public Health, Michigan Local Public Health Engineers, all around the table, all have slightly different interests. Some of them, some of the different counties inside those organizations had different interests. Townships were in play because there are townships that have time of sale septic ordinances that were being preempted. So ultimately, this is one where when you hit the crunch time of lame duck, this is why it's not a great time to pass legislation. Calls get made, and then you see what happens. In this case, the call was made. You couldn't get enough folks on board with the final version of the bill. It ultimately failed. Representative Sponsored is back this year. Each piece of legislation, we're still back, we're still looking at it. I think we have a good chance at kind of continuing this on into the next administration and hope that we can get it passed. But this is kind of the, I didn't go into the details of meeting with your lawmaker or anything. I wanted to give you kind of a broad approach of how does bill come law, really? We all know the Schoolhouse Rock song.
That's what I was thinking.
Very simplified version of what we see every day at the Capitol. We really try to dig into the policy and educate folks on what's going on. And I just want to I'll go back to this one. So again, we have a team of about 5 people, policy staff and Michigan Environmental Council. League Conservation Voters has 1 or 2 staff, a few other people have staff, or a lot of other groups have 1 or 2 or 3 staff. All of us were around the Capitol, all of us were working, all of us were meeting with legislators, all of us were meeting with the governor's team pretty consistently on all of these bills. But also, the other big thing, we're getting emails in the offices. And that's kind of the last piece of this. Specifically, that one, the tree ordinance preemption, that was a lot of public outcry that helped stall that one. Same with the wetlands. We, Travel Limited, MUCC, Michigan League Conservation Voters, had tons of emails generated to the point where I walked up to a representative, started asking her about the bill. She's like, "Oh, I've heard about that." That's always good for me, is that you've heard about it from your constituents before I come in. So it's a lot of different paths to success. Not all of them work, but we continue to try all of them as we go. So at this point, I don't like to talk the full time. I like to, I guess I have one more. A few good news. We got a few good things through. One is voluntary wetland restorations. Worked with Ducks Unlimited. We were opposed to these bills to start with because they shifted a lot of authority to the DNR. worked with the DEQ and the DNR and Ducks Unlimited, got some bills in there that will allow for more wetlands to be restored more easily by volunteer groups. It's a good thing. We have a new statutorily called for water use advisory council. So this is for groundwater withdrawals. We've had this for years in various different ways. We're now back in statute, so it's got more formal authority as opposed to just being kind of a directive of the governor to do. And then finally, this is an interesting one in that at the end we had exactly 0 input on it. This is the Renew Michigan Fund. So this was Governor Snyder's solid waste surcharge, the tip fee increase that he had talked about. We were very supportive of the tip fee. In the end, the legislature chose to instead divert internet sales tax money to this purpose through a little bit of a roundabout way. We absolutely need this money to help continue our cleanup program. If we did not get this money this year, there would be no brownfield remediation going on in the state from the state level because there was simply no money left in the fund. However, school groups were very concerned about this because this was an increase of money that they should have gotten. So this I expect to be a continuing discussion for the next legislature. There's already a bill in to kind of readjust this. We really think the tipping fee is still a good idea, and we'll be continuing to work on that. But we'll see where it goes. But at this point, at least, we do have funding for recycling. We do have funding for brownfield cleanups for now. So I am happy to take any question on anything currently going on, or from lame duck, or on best ways to talk to legislators or anything like that. And as you can see, my email up there, and all of our contact information. Start here and then go back.
Excuse me. So I'm with Citizens Climate Lobby, and I don't know if you recall, Sean, we had a phone conversation a few weeks ago.
I think so. Yeah.
From Joe.
Yes.
Joe's house.
Yeah.
So we're always, as a lobby-focused organization, we're always interested in the issue of communicating with our legislators. So I was interested in your comment about email. If you care to expand on that, I'd be interested.
Yeah. So we think there's, communication with your legislator is key to kind of getting things done. They always want to know, is a constituent going to be at this event? Can I talk to a constituent? Are they coming? It's even better when we can come to them and meet with us and the local supporter of us, who happens to be their constituent at a local coffee shop. However, on the email front, how I really see it is that email is a way to get focus on an issue. You're not necessarily going to move the needle via email. It's going to take a lot. But when the legislator starts to see, 300 emails come in on a single topic, they know that that's a hot topic. They know that that's something they got to pay attention to, and they know they start asking questions. Why is this an issue? What is this bill? It wasn't in my committee. I've never heard about it, but it seems important. I'm hearing a lot about it. And that's where, following up with phone calls. That's where they start to be like, okay, my constituents are concerned about this. Let me see what other folks have to say. So, and then from there, constituents talking about it can start to move the needle. Email itself, I think, is a powerful tool. I think it's also difficult to use correctly sometimes because you expect a lot of results from it when really it's the personal connection that really gets the job done. A lot of emails can't change minds, but where I see it is really that's how you first get the focus on the issue, and then you follow it up with phone calls, and then they realize, okay, this is where my constituents are at, and this is how I need to vote to represent them. So so in terms of mass communication, that's how I kind of view things, and that's how we try to use it. Again, we are an organization of organizations. We do have individual supporters on email lists and things like that, but we are not as sophisticated in that way as some of the other groups who really have that individual membership base. But we are really trying to grow ours to use very strategically in that way.
What, if any, position does the Environmental Council, Michigan Environmental Council, what position do you have regarding Nestle and paying, what is it, $200 a year to pump millions of gallons of water, Michigan water? Well, maybe millions, and reaping millions and millions of dollars of profit, whereas Flint still doesn't have clean water, and Detroit people, many are having trouble paying their water bills.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting issue. So clearly we have problems with the system as it's set up. And I think we are open to exploring different ways to fix it. Especially on the groundwater side, we have a lot of leeway to change the laws internally and around the state around how does our system work around withdrawing groundwater. The Nestle situation in particular is sad because the DEQ followed the law to the letter. We really need to, if we're going to fix this, it's going to be a law change. So I think we want to explore this further. It's going to be a hard sell because again, it becomes a difficult conversation in terms of when does water become a commodity? Do we want to commoditize water? Charging per gallon of water turns into a commodity, and then it becomes, well, the richest people could buy all the water. So we really need to find a way to protect it. I know Flo out of Traverse City has a proposal around public trust doctrine for groundwater. We're exploring that right now. And I think we're hopeful that the Water Use Advisory Council really kind of digs into this issue and tries to come up with a way to make this make more sense. Because you're right now when you look at all the situations around Michigan, the way it works doesn't make sense. But that's the way the law is written, and until we fix the law, we can't really fault the DEQ for following it.
You had line 5 on there as one of the things that the Attorney General's looking at right now. What's the Environmental Council's position on that? The tunnel, the new tunnel that Enbridge is taxed to build.
Yeah, so we have a lot of concerns around what happened at the end of Lame Duck, especially that the tunnel deal was presented. The tunnel deal was approved within like a 48-hour time frame for public comment. That's just on the transparency side, that doesn't work. And really the biggest problem of all of this is that there is still no date to shut down line 5. There is no date in which that line has to come out of the water and we have to stop pumping oil straight underneath the Straits of Mackinac. So we're hopeful the AG review comes out in a positive way, but we are continuing to explore all options. We are continuing to work with the Oil and Water Don't Mix, which is a coalition of groups from up north and around the state on this issue, and we think the AG is taking this seriously. And again, we really need, what we need is the line is coming out of the water on this date. No more oil will flow like the Straits of Mackinac, and it needs to be soon. It really needs to be like right now with the weather. But the final transportation has to have an end date.
One last question on fracking. The last I knew that we were waiting on the federal government to put some guidelines in place, and I don't think that's happened. Do we have anything in the works for Michigan?
We did redo our fracking rules recently. However, it hasn't been a concern, a main concern for the council right now. Due to gas prices, due to some of the other production issues in Michigan, hydraulic fracturing is not occurring in Michigan right now at any kind of scale. And based on shale plays elsewhere, we don't expect that to come back anytime soon. Now, of course, if the market dramatically shifts in some way, we could have to deal with this issue again. But at this point, it's kind of become a back burner issue because it's not happening in Michigan, and there's not really a future for it that we can see. We have more questions?
I have a question. What's the best way to keep up with what Lansing is doing? And then just to follow up on the fracking one, any concerns or on injection wells?
Okay, so on the first one, our website, we are trying to keep up to date with the top couple bills that we're working on at any given time. Right now, it's a little slow with the new administration getting their feet under them, with the new legislature mostly focused on presentations and learning as much as they can about different programs. Because I think in the House, I think a third of them are fresh off the street, basically. But our website will have that. Another way to keep track, legislature.mi.gov website, the public-facing website of the legislature. It has all the bills, it has all the committees. And you can actually sign up for committee notices to be emailed to you. So you sign up for Natural Resources Committee, and every time they post to me, you'll get an email saying, hey, we're meeting and this is the topic for the week. And then your second question was on injection wells.
Injection wells, yeah.
So this is something that is becoming more and more of an issue in Michigan. We have been watching injection well permits, and we've been kind of watching regulations around that. Really, our top concern is around some of the karst geology areas. We have some concern about what they're doing there. And it kind of talks about larger concerns about our water in general. So injection wells, fracking, of course, gets a lot of notoriety for this, but they are actually a very small player in terms of like injection well size or amount of water being injected into the brine layer. So this is, again, we're writing off a large quantity of water in some of these instances in a way that you'll not recover it because it's just contaminated water stuck in the ground. So, in terms of like water use, we think we need to really reevaluate things. And we do continue to keep an eye on it. I think at this point, I don't see it stopping entirely, but we're going to continue to keep an eye on it and make sure that we are doing the best we can to protect our groundwater and really try to get people to think about how much water are we just writing off. Because it's not just injection wells. You look at Mansalona, you look at Rockford, you look at Ann Arbor. These are contaminated aquifers there too, where we're just kind of, that water will not be drinkable unless treated. And at Mansalona, we're just, everyone goes on sewer or water from a different system instead of, working to see what we can do to address these contaminated plumes.
What are you doing to keep injection or fluids for injecting in the injection wells from coming out of state? Like Ohio or anywhere like that. How can we keep them out of our state?
We can get the Supreme Court to recognize that the Rehnquist dissent in the New Jersey waste or trash case was the correct way to move forward. So in late 90s, early 2000s, I can't remember the exact date, there was a court case that basically said you cannot stop waste from coming into your state because waste is an item of commerce and it's a violation of the Commerce Clause to ban waste from coming in. Judge Rehnquist, in his dissent, looked at it more from the space in the landfill is the item in commerce. So of course you can regulate it. not the trash guy. No one's buying trash, they're buying space in the landfill. Until we fix the Supreme Court case, there's very little we can do short of banning all injection wells in the state, or all of something in the state. So that's why our yard waste ban actually on trash is very important, because that keeps states that don't have a yard waste ban from importing trash unless they meet our laws. However, anything that complies with our laws for us is allowed into the state. So until we can fix the Supreme Court decision, which means we need a state that's willing to both pass the law and then fight to defend it, nothing is sadly ever going to change on that front. And that's for T-norm, that's for frac fluid, that's for trash, that's for anything. So it's disappointing, but that's what the federal constitutional interpretation is at the time.
We have time for about one more question.
Yep.
We have one more.
On your website, if we go and look at a particular issue, would there be a policy statement or a statement of preference, as well as information, so that if we contact our own representative, we don't have to do all the homework ourselves?
Yes, yeah. So we have short descriptions of the bills we're watching on our webpage, along with what we're thinking about that bill and what could make it better. Or whether we really like the bill. So that's all. That will all be there. Again, there's not much happening right now, so the website's slightly, probably slightly underwhelming at this point. But as the session goes on, there will be there will probably be 4 or 5 bills at any given time that will be up that we'll be really watching and pushing, either pushing for or pushing against. I will say we do really hope that the current dynamics of bipartisanship in the legislature, we will not have as many bad bills working their way through. That is our hope for the next couple of years. We really think that this is a time where we can sit down with other interest groups around the state and come to really good environmentally friendly or environmentally sound solution on some of the big topics that are still out there, especially like septic codes and some other things. We really hope that this will be a positive couple of years for the environment. We think we have a really good shot at this, especially with the folks that they pulled into the Whitmer administration. My former executive director, Chris Cole, was the budget director. Our former policy director will be starting the DQ on Monday. A few of our other environmental groups have lost some folks to the administration as well. And we really think that she's staffed well with environmentally conscious people who will work to fight for it on the administrative side, and we continue to build relationships with lawmakers. We met with 75 candidates over the summer to build those relationships, and we hope that we can really leverage those and work with our coalitions and friends to move things forward. Thank you.